can't murder liberation. You can murder revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.
You're tapped in, so let's get to it. So it seems that the more Burkina Faso in West Africa, one of the Sahel states other than Mali and Niger, it seems that anytime this country seems to excel, grow, become better and more independent, more sovereign, the more problems continue to confront the military junta that is and has established a recognition in Burkina Faso that hasn't been seen in decades, if not ages. So from what we understand, there's an escalating crisis surrounding the military junta of Captain Ibrahim Traore and the arrest of one Imam Mohammed Ishaq KINDO, who represents a volatile standoff between state survival tactics and domestic civic or religious freedoms. Okay, this sudden clash has triggered rare, widespread public protests, leading to security crackdowns, mass detentions, and the closure of major religious institutions. Now, what happened, as far as we can tell, is the immediate trigger for the crisis was the violent arrest of Imam KINDO by mass security forces in the capital city of Ouagadougou. All right, the Imam's criticism. This is the reason for the arrest. The arrest followed a widely circulated audio recording in which Imam KINDO sharply criticized a new sweeping draft law proposed by Traore's government. This law aims to strictly regulate and restrict religious freedoms and public religious expressions in the predominantly Muslim nation. Now, that part I just read is not what I've come to understand. The issue is that the reason this law was passed, put it more precisely, the aims of the law was to curtail prayer in the streets. And in the streets, we mean in traffic. It would stop commerce. It stops everything because certain Sunni Muslims want to stop wherever they are and conduct prayer. And it boggles the mind to think that they would think that this is okay, being that you need the economy to keep the country growing, to keep its independence and sovereignty intact. Because once that is allowed to occur, then commerce falters. And not only that, there seems to be from the West a perceived or suggested vacuum where unrest is now stewing. The law only really calls for those who want to worship or pray in the time where prayer is mandated and called for, to not do it to where it is blocking the process or the progress of the country's growth. Why would you stop to pray and block traffic? If you know there's a specific time to pray, why not then be at the place of worship, of prayer, at an appropriate time, so that business and those who have jobs to go to, those who have to make money to take care of their families, can go and do those things without interruption? It's as if, let's say, those who have jobs and have to do what they have to do to take care of their families and pay the bills would go and stop Muslims at mosque from praying. They would block the doorway. What sense does that make? Why would you intervene or interrupt such a process? So as a result, Imam KINDO had an issue with this. And I tell you, I think it's even bigger than that. He's been weaponized against Ibrahim Traore by outside forces, the French and the Americans and the UK specifically. Let's call it what it is, okay? So then, therefore, this guy is a puppet. As most so-called terrorists or extremists are in the region. They're only there at the beck and call of their masters, the oppressors, to destabilize a country that is attempting to get out of the grasp and the collapse, the embrace, as negative as it is, of neo-colonizers, or those who used to colonize the area, the region. This is done to destabilize the country and the progress it's making. And for the life of many of us, we can't understand why Africans, Muslim or not, Christian or not, Judean or not, would assist a colonizing country to destabilize a country that is doing well for its people and the youth. It boggles the mind. But we come to understand a lot about religion. Religion is a tool. Religion is a tool, not of freedom per se, but religion is a tool for control and chaos. Many would concede that point, chaos as well. It just boggles the mind to know that this imam would do this to his country. Now, granted, the country is maybe 63% Muslim, but does that give them the right to destabilize the country? The question it begs to be answered. Is there an attempt to make Burkina Faso a caliphate? Or is it to just keep it destabilized so that European powers can come back in and continue to pillage, rape, and extract for free, basically, the resources that they need to continue to be civilized? This makes no sense, okay? But there was an eruption of protest as a result of the arrest of Imam KINDO, and a lot of us think that was necessary, arresting. And anyone who follows him, if they have the mind to thwart or bring to an end or to stop this government in Burkina Faso, as well as Mali and Niger, that has done nothing but good for the people rather than themselves, anyone in the way should be disposed of, removed, irrespective of religious title. But anyway, there is an eruption of protests as a result. Following his arrest, hundreds of the imam supporters took to the streets to demand his release. Security forces aggressively dispersed the demonstrations with tear gas and detained nearly 100 protesters. State retaliation, as far as that go, in a direction escalation, TRAORE's junta closed down the major mosque where the protests were centered. The state transferred the detained protesters to a military-style camp for what authorities labeled mandatory civic and citizenship training, a tactic the junta routinely uses to punish and neutralize domestic critics. But again, so we have to be careful of the wording. I wouldn't use domestic critics, but I would call, domestic usurpers of a government that is doing nothing but good for the people in that country. Get them out of the way. Okay, now, but why is this occurring? All right, the underlying causes to this issue is that this crisis is a result of deep-seated security pressures and systemic tightening of authoritarian control. It is a flailing war on terror. Captain Ibrahim Traoré originally seized power in September 2022 coup by promising the population that he would completely defeat the region's rampant jihadi insurgencies within 3 months. However, the security situation has dramatically worsened. Terrorist groups linked to Al-Qaeda and ISIS now control roughly 40% of the country's territory, which is also not correct. Again, this is the West, and I'm reading from a Western script in terms of a news report. What we do know is that as a result of Ibrahim Traore's takeover of that country from a puppet government that was being controlled by France. The country has improved. It has done well. They now have roads, factories where they produce their own goods and sell them throughout the world. You know, they manufacture their own cars now. They make their own weapons now. You know, the thing is that from the outside, there is an not interruption per se, but there is intervention from outside forces to stop the progress of not only Burkina Faso, but also Mali as well as Niger. We know this. This is, you know, it's not put out in mainstream or corporate state news media outlets, but it is a fact that in terms of the so-called terrorists or the jihadists, they are on the run. They attempted something a couple of weeks ago and found themselves trapped. And now they're begging for mercy. You know, they're begging for mercy. But I don't think mercy should be given. No quarter should be given to individuals who would intentionally try to derail or destabilize a government that is good for the people. Up to this point, especially. So yes, do what needs to be done. Now, if you ask me again, I think this thing is twofold. In a lot of respects, the so-called jihadists or terrorists want to create a caliphate. They want to have a government in place that is run by Muslims, Sunni Muslims only, and by so-called Sunni law, you know, Islamic law. But this is a secular government where it caters to all religious faiths and people. There's no one above anyone else. How is that not a good government? If you want to remain Sunni or Shia Muslim, Christian, Judean, whatever the case may be, by all means be that, but do not interfere with the running or the establishment of the government, especially when it's doing all it's supposed to do to take care of the people and make sure that that country's resources stay with that country and those individuals in that country reap the benefits of said resources. All right. Most of these guys should be ashamed of themselves. But then again, we know better. We know that they are not. They are not. And most of them aren't even from Burkina Faso. Most of them come from North Africa or other Europe and other places, France, Ukraine, to destabilize a Black government, an African government. For what purpose? To keep it from being sovereign and independent from Western influence? It makes no sense. But in terms of the suppression of Imam KINDO and his followers to maintain power amidst rising public frustration and surviving over a dozen alleged coup attempts, Traore has systematically crushed the country's civic space. The junta has banned political parties, dissolved human rights organizations, and heavily censored independent media. And again, because I think I know some of what has took place in terms of what this piece is speaking about. Let me say automatically that Captain Ibrahim Traore has not systematically crushed the country's civic space. That is a lie. That's a false narrative. All right. The junta has banned political parties. That it has done because they recognize that democracy is a failed apparatus or program or service to the people. Democracy does not serve the people in the ways that democracy, the story in terms of how it's explained by Europeans, it does not work like that for Africans. Democracy allows for corruption. Ibrahim Traore and Mali, as well as Niger, have decided to disband what they call democracy, to rid their countries of this thing called democracy. Democracy has been the thorn in all of Africa's side. It's facts, you know. Democracy is a failed program, especially in Africa. Now, to go on, it says that the junta also dissolved human rights organizations. It did. It did. but the piece doesn't say who those human rights organizations were and where they came from. They're called NGOs, non-governmental organizations. However, they are the products of France, the United States, and the UK, Germany, the European Union. These NGOs come in, and they come in with spies. They come in with an agenda to overthrow the government that's in place so that European or Western countries can come back in and continue to do what they have been doing for hundreds of years. Yes, that's a fact. They have disbanded and kicked out NGOs. Just recently, Bill Gates and his wife's their NGO, were sent packing because Bill Gates wanted to experiment on the people with experimental medications, things of that nature. Certain NGOs, again, they come in as spies. They're Mossad, they're CIA, they're MI6. You know, they are spy organizations constructed and propped up and sent by the governments they come from. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that. Yeah, you would get rid of a racist if he's inside your house. You would get rid of a white supremacist if that white supremacist is inside your home and is creating dissension and destruction. That only makes sense, you know? So that being said, yes, he has gotten rid of, dissolved human rights organizations. Do the research, people. Do your research. That's a fact. He doesn't hide that fact, you know? And as a result of, they all run back to the United Nations saying, hey, there's something going on over there. Human rights are being violated. No, you were just not allowed to establish your NGO in that country. That's not a violation of human rights. That is getting rid of a Western organization that means the country no good. How is that a violation? You know? But yeah, that is what also, and it says that it is heavily censored. It has heavily censored independent media. Again, yes. One channel, France 13, France 12, propaganda, state-run France ran media outlet. They told them, sent them packing. And other European media outlets, they sent them packing. Of course, that makes sense. That way we can stop the spread of false narratives and propaganda within the city. You know, get rid of these radio stations and these TV stations that means the country no harm. So there's nothing absolutely wrong with that, I think. But simultaneously, the junta suspended the country's largest student union, the UGEB, for daring to question TRAORE's security failures. That's not the case. That's not the case. There was a puppet established within that organization of the UGEB that questioned TRAORE based upon his directions from France to question the security issue. The security issue, if most of you know, or you should, again, do your research, evolves around the so-called terrorists who are found their way back into the country with weapons they couldn't have bought by themselves, but weapons that have the insignia and signature of Western foreign powers, France, United States, and the UK. All right. So they're telling them, hey, the reason for these security issues that we have to continue to combat is because we have outside influences, forces trying to find their way back in by destabilizing the country. They use so-called, again, terrorists or jihadists, ISIS, you know, Al Qaeda, you know, how the hell did ISIS and Al Qaeda get into Burkina Faso? Think about it, you guys. It makes no sense. So the secular versus the traditionalist culture class is about the friction. It also stems from the junta's efforts to reshape the country's identity. That's it. It wants to bring identity back to a country that had it before the colonizer got there. Had it, and the colonizer is just not the West or Western influences. It is also Islam. Islam colonizes. It enslaves. This must be said. To not say it, I would be remiss. I would be doing a disservice. Islam does not offer certain freedoms, for everybody, and especially women. So there that is, it makes sense. I would shut them down too. This extremism that we see with Islam nowadays, and it is a manufactured thing. And if you do your research, you'll learn that it was manufactured by the West. Extremism became a thing when Russia was at war. Do your research, people. That's when extremism became a thing, became this phrase that was used. Before then, it wasn't. Extremism became a thing in the war with Russia, when Russia was having this war back in 1989 through about 91. The Mujahideen and all that became a thing in that war, and it has carried on since then. So yeah, Tory's government has actively elevated and institutionalized traditional African ancestral practices. Why is that a problem for Islam or for Sunni Muslims or for the West? For Captain Ibrahim Traore and his government to reinstall in its institutions traditional African ancestral practices. What's the problem with that? And to boot, just so everyone knows, Captain Ibrahim Traore is a Muslim. Now, I tell you, if that's the case, and it by all accounts it is, he should be commended as such. That's a Muslim. In May of 2026, the government instituted a mandatory national holiday honoring African ancestral traditions. Several Islamic clerics who criticized this move as fetishistic or un-Islamic was swiftly handed prison sentence. Yeah, because now you're trying to create dissension. Now you're telling people that they can't even have ties with their ancestral heritage. If it's not Islam, if it's not Muslim, then no, we can't have it. Let's do away with it. That's the problem. That's the problem. And again, not just with Islam, but with Christianity as well. Maybe even also Judaism. That is the problem. That is the problem. The draft law to regulate religious expressions is seen by the Muslim community, and I don't know if that's even true, but it's seen by Imam KINDO, no doubt, and other so-called clerics like him who are extremists. It can be said it's seen by them as a deliberate attempt by a secular military junta to control the mosque and strip away Islamic influence over public life. Yeah, do that. Do that. Do that. Separate politics from religion. Do that. And let it be known that that religion really should have no place in the politics of the people in terms of how society is ran, especially when it's fair. Yeah, do that. And in fact, get rid of all of them that want to have an issue with trying to destabilize an African nation that has separated itself from Western influence. Do that by all means. Well, anyway, the crisis is occurring because Captain Traore's government is attempting to rule through absolute force to compensate for its inability to secure the country from terrorism. See, again, we have to be mindful of what's being said. This is the Western media speech I'm reading. That's not the case. The crisis is occurring because Western influences, governments, France, Great Britain, or the UK, and the United States have been kicked out of the country in such a way to where they can no longer rape and pillage the country of its natural resources and not give anything back in return. That's the real issue. That's the real issue. So be mindful of the fact that this thing is occurring because those foreign powers no longer have a say in the development of Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. That's the issue. But we have simple-minded brothers and sisters who come under religious banners who really don't know any better, are very ignorant in spite of their religion, very ignorant and are gullible because they don't know any better. They assist the oppressor in his or their attempt to continue to oppress. And their hope also, these Islamists, is to also oppress. Facts. I'm totally against that. And if you can't hear it in my voice, well, again, there's something wrong with you. Yeah. All false narratives. But by attempting to pass laws restricting religious speech, the junta crossed a major red line for the nation's Muslim majority. And that, again, is a false narrative. It's a lie. That was not the case. The fact of the matter was, again, the law was passed to keep Muslims from prohibiting commerce, from stopping traffic and businesses from doing business. Not only that, but, oh, you need somewhere to pray, we'll build you mosque. Go to your mosque and do that. Do not have large gatherings stopping the progress of society because you want to convert. You want to recruit. It makes no sense. It makes no sense to allow that to happen. Were I the type of guy that was leading the country, I would do the same thing because I understand what's at stake here. They're not fighting just the European powers, the old colonizers. They're fighting some of their own because of how they've been indoctrinated. Shut them down. Shut them down. That's what I say. Imam KINDO gave voice to a population increasingly exhausted by shrieking freedoms, and the junta's violent response has fractured the domestic unity the government desperately needs to survive. Again, this is, wow. This is what you call propaganda. Now, if anyone, again, can recall when this thing took place and Ibrahim Traore took over the country, Muslims, Christians, all citizens alike cheered that. Cheered it. Now they're trying to paint a picture that now there are large numbers, of rising up against Ibrahim Traore. That is, again, a false narrative. A couple of hundred. The Imam had a few hundred followers. Okay, fine. The point was not about suppressing freedom of religion. The point was about religion taking it upon itself, or an Imam taking it upon himself to stop the progress of commerce or society, because this is what he wanted to do. That's out of line with how the society should function. Who made him God or gave him the right to do that? None of it makes any sense in terms of how these people or why these people are doing what they're doing. None of it makes any sense. And again, when we're talking about this guy, Imam Dr. Muhammad Ishaq KINDO, we're talking about a guy who is, just looking at this squarely, is being influenced or controlled by outside influences. And it doesn't necessarily have to be the European forces or influences we're talking about. It can be other so-called jihadists or extremists in the area who can't seem to get, overthrow the government like they thought they would, even with France, United States, and Britain's help. He's being asked from his brothers outside of the get down to help destabilize the government so that they can take over and do what? And do what? What the Europeans did, what France has done, the United States, UK, raped the country of its riches, its resources for themselves. And that's what most of them do as well. They're super rich. I don't care if we could go from the United States to anywhere over the world where these so-called imams and these, these speakers, of this religion, they're all rich, super rich. Yet the people continue to suffer and have nothing. Why they follow them, I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, again, when you're talking about what's really going on in Burkina Faso, you have to be all inclusive. You have to think in terms of what other influences or powers are at work here, and what are those powers at work willing to do? Who's assisting them? What intelligence agency is helping them to find an inroad in towards destabilizing Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger? A lot of people won't ask those questions, won't even dig deep, will not even take the time to understand what's really going on. But they'll support religion, and not a lot of people don't really understand it, though they say they do. Again, when we're talking about these people, these Islamists, these jihadists, these extremists, we're talking about people who act barbaric, who are not civilized. We're talking about people who enslave, who kill whole villages. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about people no different than Benjamin Netanyahu or Donald Trump or Macron or Steimer or Mears or Putin or Zelensky. They're all killing people for power. So it should come as no surprise that here at TAP, we support the efforts and the government of Ibrahim Traore, as well as the government of Mali and Niger. And we wish may those brothers receive all the peace and prosperity, as well as the guidance and wisdom that's required for them to continue to lead their people out of oppression and poverty. Support Ibrahim Traore. Support Chichani. Support Goita. The brothers are doing something that no one else in Africa is willing to do. And to the people of Burkina Faso, don't be fooled. Don't be bamboozled by these so-called jihadists, these Islamists, these extremists. They don't want to do any more than what the European nations, France, United States, and UK have done already. That's what they want. They want to turn. They don't want to lead the people into prosperity, sovereignty, autonomy, independence. No, they want to control everything that's over there. And that would include you, the people. This is TAP. Please like, share, follow, and subscribe to this channel. We appreciate your viewership and participation with this channel. Until next time, take care of yourselves and one another.
You can murder a liberator, but you can't murder liberation. You can murder a revolutionary, but you can't murder revolution. And you can murder a freedom fighter, but you can't murder freedom.